Well, it's great to have you here this morning. Hey, how about this weather? It's going to get hot this week. Welcome to extreme summer. From rain to, I was just, it was interesting. My wife and I were planning like a lawn, and of course, like as everything, I'm always behind the times about 3 weeks. And holy cow, it was something else. I was just like, rain, get out there for a couple minutes, you watch your seed float down the hill. It's kind of, dang it. Today is our last Sunday with our Love and Marriage series. And we're going to talk about a fun thing, leaving a legacy. Because as you know, God designed in his infinite wisdom, Adam and Eve came together and they were supposed to be fruitful and multiply, to carry on, to say a human legacy to be passed on from generation to generation to generation. And it's not just DNA that we hand off from generation to generation to generation. There's like a societal DNA, like who we are. Put it this way. As Great Fallsians, we're different than Bozemanites. I could have called them bozos. As Montanans, we're uniquely different than, say, Californians. And as Americans, we are uniquely different than most about everybody. And one of the things that we have to realize is that in the past, we had like family characteristics that we passed on from one generation to another, right? Like, for instance, your name, if you were a carpenter, you passed on the skills of your trade to your son or your kids. And next thing you know, they're passing it on, and it becomes such a part of you that your name is probably Carpenter. Don't ask me to explain, like, Petersons. I mean, you make good Peters, I guess. But when we're looking at this patenting on from generation to generation, there's something that we have to realize. Legacies are good, and legacies are bad. I read a while back about a family that invested all this money into finding out what their genetic background and their family tree was all about. They spent so much money on finding out who they were that they found out something really bad. Their great uncle, George, was a prisoner that was executed in the electric chair for murder. So to cover it up, they spent more money hiring a biographer because they wanted their family's tree to read nicely. So what does the biographer come up with? Well, he makes it sound like this. George occupied a chair of applied electronics at a government institution. He was attached to his position by the strongest of ties. His death came as a real shock to us. You ever notice sometimes you try to hide the past and kind of like, the ugly secrets of your legacy that you won't want people to know? And sometimes there's a legacy that is bad, very bad, and we don't know why. For instance, take the Hatfields and McCoys, that feud that started in the 1800s. You know what it started over? A pig. A pig. 4 generations of death, feuding, fighting, lawsuits over a pig. It came to the point that in the 2000s, they thought it'd be funny and brought the Hatfields and McCoys into Family Feud, a TV show. That didn't even settle it. That Hatfields won the game, but the McCoys made more money. Legacies can involve some of the most violent things like these Hatfields and McCoys, arson, pure evil. But we have to realize that sometimes, especially in these legacies as we look at them, we cannot be a people whose foundation of our lives is being against somebody else or against something. We can't define ourselves by evil or wrong. If we need someone else to be wrong for our life to have meaning and to be right, we need a new life. We need a new foundation. Our life's legacy isn't just to be better people or to hand something off. Our life's legacy revolves around being a people that hand off the greatest and deepest truths of our relationship with God from one generation to another. So what I'm saying is it's not about money, though blessing your family with money is beautiful. It's not about skill, though blessing your family with skill is important. It is not the most important thing. The most important thing is what is the substance in your heart that God has deposited in there going to look like when it's handed off to the next generation. A legacy is something that has two parts. We're going to go over this. The first part is a tangible touch, a gift, something that's been given or left for us. The second part of a legacy is intangible, not touchable. It's a spirit or an attitude, a faith, a sacrifice, something that has been put in us. So legacies are things that are left for us and things that are put in us. Does that make sense? Things that are left for us, things that are put in us. Maybe this might make more sense to you. A legacy is not just teachable, something that you physically learn. It's something that's catchable, something that is caught in your heart and in your soul. So to leave a good legacy is to leave more of what God has given you than you have taken. To deposit everything that God has put in you. The families I spoke about earlier, they had a really bad common denominator. They insisted on passing grievance, sin, and pride from one generation to the next. But we're going to look at how to sow into our legacy by planting in us and giving away what God has put in us and passing down not what we are, but what God has made us to be. So it's worth a little side note here. Let me take a little rabbit trail for just a second. We oftentimes look at ourselves and say things like, I will not become like my father. I will not do what this person did. In many ways, we make a big mistake because we're doing it wrong. We're making an inner vow that says, I will never be, I will never do. And you're relying on yourself, your power, and your ability to do what only God can do. Only God can transform a heart and soul and make it like His. Your doing will make it a better version of you that's still you. You have to realize that when we make these inner vows, we make things worse by committing to being something that is fleshly and not godly. You empower evil by not walking in the power of God. Okay? So we need to stay away from this inner vow when it comes to transformation because we're giving away then what we can do and what not what God can do. And the way to pass on a godly legacy is to live as you're called and to live as God has created you to be. In obedience to the Spirit and the Word of God, transforming your mind and your heart, transforming your nature to be someone that actually hands off the beautiful, the powerful, and the godly to the next generation. How to leave a positive legacy? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to be intentional. Look at the person next to you and say, be intentional. Go. I know. There you go. You need to be intentional and leave obvious things for your next generation to pick up on. We're going to look at one, and it's a big one. It's in Joshua chapter 4, verse 4. It says this, Joshua called together 12 men that he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and he says to them, go before the ark of the Lord your God in the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, and according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. Follow with me now. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. Okay, Rick, how is that a legacy? Look, we need to do the two things that happened in this passage. One, there was an actual physical monument built to remind the people every time they walked past it what God had done. Two, when you are telling the story, because in this passage baked in is the idea that when we tell the story, when our children ask, when the next generation wants to know, what does this pile of rocks mean? We pour the meaning of the kingdom and the story and the testimony of what God has done into the hearts and souls of that next generation. So it's not really about a pile of rocks. It's about the power of God to tell the story again and again and again. Legacies tend to not last because the generation doesn't take in the light or the power of a story and doesn't pass on the story because it doesn't mean anything to them. Many times our failings lie when we see the monument or the pile of rocks and don't connect it to what God has done. The stories of our lives. When I thought I was going to be broke and kicked out of my house and God showed up in some financial blessing. When I was fighting with my cousin and we thought that there was no end and God's redemptive power stepped in and forgiveness and restoration made us the best of friends now. Not just blood, but the best of friends. It's those stories in those moments that it's not just about the rocks, it's about what God has done. Because, guys, if we don't tell the story to the next generation, how are they going to hear it? Imagine the scene. 12 priests are holding that Ark of the Covenant. Let me remind you something. It's made of gold. It's got stone tablets in it. It's heavy. If I was one of those priests, you know what I'd be doing? Hey, hurry up with those rocks. It's getting heavy here. Hey. You done yet? Generation after generation saw the markers and heard the stories as they walked by. And your legacy, what you hand off to the next generation, has to be a sign of not just God's faithfulness, but a miraculous intervention into what he's done for you. The word in Hebrew for testimony means to do it again. That God would do it again. Baked into that word is, I'm telling you the story so that God would do it again. And that's what we live for. Not so that one generation has their own pile of rocks to say, look what God did for me. But there would be constant stories to tell of generation after generation saying, look what God did for me. And in those moments, we find ourselves handing off not just the physical sign of a monument, but the Spirit's reminder of the awe and wonder and power that God has set in our hearts. A sign for generations to rekindle the love and passion for God and the things of God. And that is what we live for. And that's the legacy and how we participate in it. Now look, legacies are designed to be fulfilled. Legacies are designed by God to be fulfilled in us. It says this in Psalm 139:16. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. God designed this life for us to live, to fulfill the constant retelling and ignition of the kingdom of God in other people's hearts. So it's not just like you show up and you say, hey, here I am. God, what are you going to do with me or for me? No, we show up and God says, you are designed and called for a purpose. A beautiful thing is about to happen to you. And we need to live and capture that beauty. You fulfill it with a tangible contribution. We're going to step into how to fulfill your legacy right now. One, there are tangible contributions, physical things that you do. Your contribution's more than just a sign. You know, like oftentimes we think our contribution is to like buy a Christian bumper sticker. Great, your car's saved. Or we get one of those cool signs at the Christian bookstore that says, blessed beyond measure. Well, look, those are awesome, and I'm glad you're buying them, and I'm glad you're participating in that. But that's someone else's vision and for growth and for legacy. That is something else someone has put inside of them to release out to bless people. You may align with it, and by all means, buy one and get in on that, and if it describes who you are, great. But that bumper sticker is not your legacy. It's a description of your legacy or something you connect with. It's a reminder to you of what you are to be. Your physical legacy has to be something that comes out of you to describe to people what God has done in you. That makes sense? I completely lost everybody in this room. Should we just pray and say good night? What God has put in you is unique. Would you agree? So then if it does its work in you, what comes out of you is also unique. By your gifting, by your design, God is going to move out of you in ways that are as unique as your thumbprint to reach and touch and minister to people's lives. Your legacy is a beautiful gift that you share, that is built by the work that you do in your soul, and it reflects itself tangibly outside. What do I mean by that? Your spiritual gifts, for instance. Perhaps you're a person of compassion. You're compassionate and you move in people's lives and you give or you serve. Perhaps your spiritual gift is like teaching and encouragement, where you actually step into people's lives and you bring encouragement and words of grace and peace that encourage people to see God uniquely. Perhaps your gift is craftsmanship, and you design and build things that are monuments in this world for people to realize that God is real today. Maybe that's you. The physical signs of your faith. And it's a profound thing. But there's also, you leave a legacy spiritually. And we're going to dig into this. We have a legacy to leave, and it's in the spirit. It is, think of it this way, a movement, not a monument. Can that pile of rocks, that monument of rocks, speak and give life to people? No, it sits as a reminder. The legacy we leave that comes out of us is where I'm talking about. It's a movement, not a monument. When something is a monument, it stands there to remind you. When you have a movement, like a revival, that is a message that is transforming people's hearts. That's a move of the Spirit. That's something alive going from one life to another life to ignite and bring life to and on from generation to generation. In that Joshua passage, you see them set up a physical monument, but there's a captured vision that is put in that meaning. It says, when your children ask, you tell them the story. You, friends, are spiritual storytellers every time we encounter the things of God. They are meant to be given away. God set that reminder, but the story is what matters. The story defines a monument, and we're supposed to be people that live it out, give it away, that share it. We're supposed to have a healthy flow of what God does in us released out. The Spirit is flowing outward, calling us to do this work, and He's calling us to be a people that does that. Guys, in many ways, you have to think of yourself this way. I'm just a crusty old fisherman, so I'm going to just say it this way. You're a river, not a reservoir. There's a difference. Rivers flow and give life. That Missouri ends up all the way in the Gulf. Reservoirs hold water. They hold. We're to give. The difference between Holter and the Great Salt Lake is the Salt Lake has no outlet. So everything that's poured into it condenses and actually starts becoming unhealthy and unable to sustain life. We, as people, cannot be people that hold and restrain and keep the things of God for ourselves. We need to be rivers of living waters, what Jesus calls it. We need to give away a legacy of God's grace, of His power, of His mercy, of His word, so that we continue to transform everything that touches our lives. We influence that outwards. In Judges chapter 2, verse 10, after Joshua's leadership, it says this: after a whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up that neither knew the Lord or what He had done for Israel. Every society faces the fact that we are one generation away from losing our foundations and our basic understandings if we do not pass them on. The point of a legacy is to give both a physical and spiritual blessing. And it is to participate in what God is doing and inspire and to teach the next generation to do the things and do it well, that carry on the practices and the advancing of the kingdom. God wants all mankind to experience His power, His mercy, His grace, and His word. Period. In Psalm 139:16, it says, In Psalm 139:16, it says, your eyes saw my unformed body and ordained them for me and written in the book of life once it came to be. The days that are ordained that God sees, we need to realize, matter. I'm going to tell you a story that I brought up during Father's Day during that message about a legacy. And it was a study that was done in 1877 about two men that lived in the 1700s. I'm not saying this to be like comparing, to bring shame or weight on anyone. I'm saying this so that we can realize how important what we give away really is and how meaningful it can be. Not that this is a pressure to perform, but an invitation to release blessing. And there's a difference. Two men that were studied. One was Jonathan Edwards. He was a Puritan preacher in the 1700s. He attended Yale at the age of 13. He was married to his wife Sarah in 1727, and they had 11 kids. Every night he would pray a blessing of an hour over each child and talk to each child for at least an hour. Jonathan and Sarah left a godly legacy to the kid. Then there was Max Jukes. Max Jukes came to the attention of the study because in his tree there were about 42 different people in the New York prison system that were directly linked to his lineage. Let me show you their family tree in comparison. Jonathan Edwards' legacy includes one vice president, a dean of law school, a dean of a medical school, 3 U.S. senators, 3 governors, 3 mayors, 13 college presidents, 30 judges, 60 doctors, 65 professionals, 75 military officers, 80 public office holders, 100 lawyers, 100 clergymen, and 285 college graduates. Duke's descendants included 7 murderers, 60 thieves, 190 prostitutes, 150 convicts, 300 paupers, 440 who were physically wrecked by addiction to alcohol, and 1,200 of his descendants were studied. 300 had died prematurely. These contrasting legacies provide an example of what we can do if we choose to pass on what God has given us, or if we choose to pass on what the world has to offer. The point isn't how well you perform in passing it on. The point is how wonderful it is to bless the generations to come with the legacy of the kingdom, of what God can do, of the beauty of his presence and his power. Because this leads to this: a healthy, wonderful relationship with God in your legacy that you hand off will have one component. I got a great one-word answer: contagiousness. Joy, hope, wonder, and power are contagious. Good things happen. You see, we are to touch the hearts of the men and women around us with the power of God so that they can change and then they can become world changers. We change the world one soul at a time, right? We can change the world by being this: hope distributors, the hope dealers. Careful what part of town you're in when you say that dealer stuff. Hope dealers. The promise of the things of unseen, the hope of the world of the kingdom that lies within us, that changes the world. We are no longer slaves to despair. We're the carriers of the joy and the hope of the kingdom. And when we pass that on, when we pass on the legacy of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, when we pass on the joy of a relationship with God and the power of what he has done, when we tell the stories of how he continually shows up, continually changes things, and continually brings life, generations change. Lives change. People change. We are to proclaim that and plant the seeds of hope into the next generation. The legacies of hope and the truth that overcomes is what we give to people. There needs to be a legacy of hope that there is something better. There needs to be a legacy of truth that what I say to you will change the world. You may live in a place where you're saying, "No, Rick, you don't know me. You don't know my life. That's not me. That can't be me. I'm too defeated. I'm too down. You don't know what I've been through." Okay, fair enough. But God does. I mean, you want me running in solving your problems? Because I'll make a mess. Let's tell you right now. Let me set that expectation right where it belongs. But God knows. God knows, and not only knows, he's walked through with you. Many people talk and think they're limited by the things that they have done. I can't be this because of that. I can't do this because of my past. That is a lie. And I got a four-word answer for you. I know. Good thing it wasn't more. I'd run out of fingers. Got a 4-word answer for you. Stop believing the lie. There is nothing in your past that is going to limit you from a future that God can redeem. Nothing. He died so that his Spirit can indwell you and call you to a life that is beyond your past. But Rick, you don't know what I've done. I don't need to know what you've done because I can't do anything about it. And you don't want to know what I've done because you wouldn't be here. The Spirit that lives inside you is what matters, and he can live through you with love, with mercy, with power. And like this passage says in Psalm 78, 2 through 4, it says this, I will open my mouth with a parable, and I will utter hidden things from old. Things we have heard and known, things our ancestors have told us. We will not hide them from our descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his powers, and the wonders he has done. That psalm, credited to David. You remember who David was? He's got a little dirty list going on. Murder, adultery, lots of murder, multiple wives. You want to stack your list up against his? Because I think he might win. He wrote that. And he says, we will not hide the things of God. We will make them known to our descendants and let the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done. We need to start living our legacies by number one. Here's your first hot tip for Sunday morning. You can write this one down. Open your mouth. Start being a blabbermouth about the things of Jesus. Start telling the stories of what he's done. Rick, I can't do that. I got 4 words for you. Stop believing the lie. What do you mean you can't do that? Of course you can do that. Speak the things of God. Speak the things that he's done. Speak of what he's done in generations past. Speak of those truths. Speak about how God has faithfully shown up for you and has not let you down. But God hasn't answered my prayers, Rick. I can't say that. I got news for you. No is an answer. Sorry. God isn't here to answer your prayers, yes, every time. He's here to cultivate your soul so you become like him. And the best instrument of that little development is this word, no. Because when you become less of what you want, you become more of what he has designed. Live out that legacy you were called by telling those around you about God, about his love, about his mercy. And you don't need to be having all these grandiose stories and theological perspectives. There is one truth that people cannot deny. This is what God did for me. I know he can do something for you. Part of the answer to that question of, well, maybe I can't live in a way that honors the kingdom. Well, look, listen. None of us can. That's why we need Jesus. And we overcome sin by living out the power and the presence of God in our life. Don't be afraid to commit to what that passage said in verse 4, that we will not hide the testimony from our descendants, that we will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders that he has done. I know maybe some of you are saying, Rick, I don't have those stories. Look, thanks for being honest. But maybe, just maybe the challenge needs to be that you start putting your trust in him and start asking for him to show up. Start being in the place where God has to show up so that you can see him move. Maybe for some of you, this is your opportunity for the first time to consider that my relationship with Jesus isn't about showing up, sitting in a seat, but actually engaging in a relationship with the Almighty God. That there needs to be something deeper than just, I pray and walk away. That maybe there needs to be a relationship with a God where every minute of your life, there's an engagement to say and ask this question. Papa God, what do you want from me today? Maybe for some of you, the question might look like this. This is a question I ask myself all the time. What needs to die in me so that people can see Jesus? Is it pride? Arrogance? Selfishness, where I just don't ignore what's going on around me? All that can come and be placed at the foot of the cross for Jesus to be moving and healing. So if that's you, this is a place where you want to engage in that relationship. I want to offer to you an opportunity to come to know Jesus in a truer, deeper way. You just bow your heads with me. Father, I pray for these souls right now. I sense some need a renew, and some need a complete perspective change. Some need to walk in a relationship, and some need to re-enter a relationship because they've just wandered away. And you love them both. So if this is you, I'm just going to ask you to pray along with me. Father God, forgive me for walking away from you. Receive me as your son or daughter. Pour into me your spirit. Release me from my sin. Forgive me for what I've done that's offended you.